moving on to the AMA portion, kind of an intro portion, and that's where FF's going to be taking over.
Thanks, Kevin. And good evening, everybody. As Kevin noted, my name is FF. I'm your illustrious MC this evening. You might know me as your friendly yet somewhat vicious moderator and community director here in CS Career Hub. And if you were here for us for our previous AMA during our trial AMA, you'll note that we had a pretty interesting format going. We were not necessarily taking our own questions that the team felt was, most appropriate. We took your questions, you from the crowd, you from the audience, and we gave you a chance to ask us what matters to you. And that's what an AMA is all about. And so for today's AMA, we're going to have a similar format. We're going to be going through the list of questions that have been submitted throughout the week, the ones that have had, the most traction, those thumbs up that we asked you to put on those questions that you like the most, and we proceeded to ask them accordingly. So in terms of what our AMA is about today, we have two speakers here who were serial interns in college with over 5 internships and part-time dev jobs, and now they've been at their first full-time job for about 1 to 2 years as new grads. So the two people we have on today, Gopher and Brenda, they're both two of our moderators, Gopher being a senior mod and Brenda being one of our admins, really the partner in crime to Kevin. And to give you a little bit of a background on each of them, Gopher is a programming language enthusiast. If you've ever seen him in the chat, you'll know that's true. He's also a graduate of the University of Sherbrooke, a small school in the Quebec countryside, where he completed 5 internships as part of his co-op program. He's been an active user here on CSCH since his second year at university, eventually becoming a moderator a couple of years ago, and he's been working at his first full-time job as a software engineer at Samsung Ads since November of 2020. And I'm sure he'll love to tell you a little bit about this. He's already been promoted, so we'll be digging into his story in a little bit. Brenda has been hanging out here in CSCH as a moderator for several years and is now Kevin's, as I said, partner in crime in developing the community. She's held quite a few internships herself during her time at UC Berkeley, along with freelance jobs and part-time developer jobs. And after graduating, she started as a full-time software engineer at Adobe. On the side, she still does some freelance here and there, but has largely moved from development into other interests such as writing and community management, which makes her a perfect fit here. So, as noted, we will be looking at a lot of the questions that you folks have already asked here today and over the past few days. And I want to note that if at any point in time you're interested in actually participating, asking your question directly, we have the option of having you raise your hand and actually ask your question right to Brenda or Gopher. So if you're interested, you're feeling brave, raise your hand with the little Discord feature at the bottom of the AMA stream going on right now, and I'll make sure to get you plugged in and ask your question. So let's get this party started. And I'm going to start with the very first question from our very own Harp, one of our server contributors. And once again, I'm going to open this up, make it a little bit more broad, let Brenda or Gopher answer as they see fit. What are traits you've noticed that make a good engineer, as in technical capability or solid communication skills, or really anything else?
I could talk about that one a little bit. I know for me and for a lot of my colleagues that hired me at Samsung Ads, and we've talked about this a lot about like what makes a good engineer and how do you recruit for them. And one thing that kept coming up, I think, is just like having someone care is like already a huge first step. Because like if someone like legitimately cares about their work, about writing quality software, whether that's being software that's correct or efficient or clear, or whatever combination of any adjectives you might think of, just caring to deliver quality generally means you'll take the steps to get there. And even if you make mistakes along the way, if you care about delivering quality, you'll learn from those mistakes and go and correct them as much as you can. So, and I think you can apply that to not just like writing software, but also like communication. Like if you care about being a team player, you'll also take the steps to become a better communicator, to write documentation, so that the next people on the team can learn better and onboard better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I totally agree. I think solid communication skills are definitely a part of it, whether that's like through writing documentation, through asking questions when you need help, or just talking to team members and keeping them updated and like not siloing yourself off. I think communication is definitely a huge part of engineering that not everyone realizes or really pays attention to, because everyone like kind of stereotypes engineers as people who just sit in front of their screen all day and stare at it and that's it. But there's actually a ton of teamwork involved in engineering, to understand what other people are working on, so other people understand what you're working on, so that the whole team is cohesive and like the project is going smoothly in one direction for everyone, and everyone like has the same goal. So I think communication and teamwork are really big ones. Another thing is just resourcefulness. So that kind of goes with what I said earlier about asking questions, whether you're asking the question on Google and trying to figure it out by doing your research and looking it up, or by asking your teammates or more senior engineers or your peers when you need help. Just asking questions and having all sorts of ways to figure out your problem, because not all of it is just like magical technical ability that comes from your brain. What makes a good engineer is how resourceful they can be, whether that's looking up documentation, looking up answers in Stack Overflow, or getting help from teammates. I think that's a huge one for being a good engineer.
Absolutely. And that's something that carries you all the way from the beginning of your career, all the way up into the late stages, I'm sure. And that's one of the great things about this series we have coming up is we'll have perspectives not just from, early high achieving folks such as Gopher and Brenda, but also many of the people in our server who have been doing this for many years, some for well over a decade. And based on the conversations you'll see in the chat, you'll see this consistent story of how important communication is to a team's ability to succeed. So great input. And it looks like we had somebody raise their hand momentarily, but they dropped out. Let's go ahead and jump back over to the questions list. And we're actually going to have a question from our very own resident slacker, Sam, who asks, what's your favorite question to ask interviewers? And on the other hand, what's your favorite question to ask interviewees? And I feel like Gopher here in particular has a little experience on both, so let's start with him.
Yeah, well, recently I've started interviewing as well. Well, from the point of view of the interviewer, but I haven't done a ton of these. I've only done a few, so I don't know if I have like a favorite question yet. I think that's something that I might like find out if I continue to do interviews. But as an interviewee, I think one of the questions that I almost always ask now, or did before the pandemic, which kind of made things a little weird, was what do people on the team do for lunch? And it might seem like a bit of a weird question, but it's from one of my internships, where the team for lunch would essentially just all eat alone in silence at their desk, and I found that I really didn't like that kind of environment. I would rather like the people I work with, like exchange like they spend lunch like talking to each other or something. And so now I just ask that just to kind of get a bit of a vibe check of the team and see if I would enjoy working there as well. And that's probably one of the very valuable things that comes with doing internships is you can try different like corporate or team environments and see what you like and dislike.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Brenda, I don't know how much experience you had on the other hand on both sides of the table.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've really only done mock interviews in terms of interviewing, but I've done a lot of being an interviewee. And what I like to ask my interviewers usually is first the easy question of what's your favorite thing about the job and what do you like about the job and the company. Um, but then I like to ask the opposite question too of what do you not like about it? And I find that's actually often more insightful because everyone kind of says the same stuff for what they like, oh, they love the team, they love the culture, et cetera, or maybe the work-life balance. But I think when I ask what they don't like, I get much more unique answers. They're usually pretty specific too. So I think that's actually a pretty good question to ask.
It's funny how much the negative questions stick to us, right? The ones that just jump out at us. Yeah, good point. We have somebody brave enough to raise their hand. You love to see it. All right. So we have a visitor today coming in since we are now a public stage. And I just want to remind everybody in the audience, you too can participate in today's chat. Just raise your hand. And remember, server rules still apply. Be appropriate, be respectful, and ask your question in a pointed manner, and we'll get you an answer. So we have two people jumping in. So we have Baticus. Let's start with you. Baticus appears to be a member of the server. And any minute now. Looks like Discord doesn't want you to speak for some reason. Interesting. Very odd. Let's try and bring in ORZZZ.x. Let's try them next. Oh, Baticus, looks like you're on. Welcome to the show. Let's start with you.
You're muted.
And Baticus, if you're trying to chat, looks like you're muted.
Try to
Oops.
move
Oops.
on. Oh, there we go.
Oh, sorry.
All good.
Ugh. So my name is Baticus. I go by this handle online. Basically, I just realized how good at extrapolations I am on this Monday. No, weird. I'm 29. And my high school or my education stops at high school, but technically. So I'm just curious if you have any advice in the line of, you know, any employers I could be looking into. I already have a foot in the door, an olive branch, so to speak. So I'm just trying to learn from you guys.
Sure. Let me repeat the question back to you to make sure that we're answering the right one. So essentially, you're coming from a background of high school education being the final diploma that you have, and you're looking for insight into places to look for work in the field around computer science, software engineering, places that might be able to help you get a chance. Is that the right question?
Pretty much. And also, just I'm self-taught C++ when I was 14 or so. I know, nasty. If only I realized what I was getting myself into then. But that's beside the point. But to be full stack once I get JavaScript under my belt.
Hey, there are dozens of us in the server, dozens, who started with C++. You're not alone.
Awesome.
Yeah, so let's get started with the question. Gopher, Brenda, whenever you're ready to take it, go for it.
Well, I can start. It's always difficult to give like recommendations because for two reasons. First, I don't know where exactly you are. So like if you're say in Montreal, I could potentially recommend companies I know are at least open to self-taught people. But those recommendations would be useless to you if you lived anywhere else. And on top of that, like I can I can give kind of a general uh, recommendations based on what I've seen others do, but since I myself took a very traditional path toward the career in tech, I don't have like first-hand experience that I can rely on to help you. But the I did work with people that had essentially a high school diploma or a bit more, and were largely self-taught, and how they broke into the industry was generally by being very active in things like meetups and hackathons in like kind of the local scene, and doing a ton of like open source contributions and personal projects and the like, and like eventually by going to all these events and participating in all these things, he met the right people that led him to get his first job. So that's about like the only that's about really the only thing I think I can give that can help, is kind of like that pathway that I know these people took.
Cool. Yeah, I mean that all makes sense.
Yeah, that
Appreciate
makes
the
a lot
input.
of sense, Gopher. There's specific options that are available to you at that level, right? And a lot of it can just come down to networking. Brenda, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say my own path is fairly traditional, but I don't exactly have a computer science degree. I have a cognitive science degree, um, where I really only had to take like two CS classes for it. The rest were a lot of psychology, sociology, like neuroscience, other random stuff that don't have to do with CS. Um, so I mean, I did go to a four-year university though, so I mean that does kind of help, since that part is traditional. But the way I got into the industry was not through like academics. What I did was I took a bunch of jobs at smaller, like no name little startups or little businesses. I did some work for nonprofits, did like part time and freelance jobs here and there, and just kind of got my foot in the door in all sorts of ways. Built up that experience through a bunch of places you would have never heard of, and then just started going to bigger companies after that. Um, I feel like as long as, I mean, I think you said you had your foot in the door, right? So I think like the industry is honestly pretty welcoming to people without the right degree or without a college degree, as long as you have the skills, and you have many ways to get your foot in the door through just like working in the industry, getting experience, making connections when you work at those places, um, and that'll get you really far.
Cool, thank you.
Great input, Brenda. Batticus, I hope that helped you get a little insight. I know, again, your demographic is very specific to you and your situation, but we do encourage you to ask your questions, your more pointed questions in the chat in the future as well, to get more input as well.
Oh, I've got an additional one if you'd like. I've got an basically.
All right,
Do you have
let's
any
go
advice
ahead
on the line?
and
Because oops, sorry.
move on to Ors. Ors, you are muted, but you're welcome now to ask your question. Welcome to the
Hello.
chat.
Oh, sorry.
It looks like you're muted right now.
Muted? Wait, you can't hear me. Wait, can you hear me? Or hello?
Yep, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
we can hear you. FF, not sure you hear them.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you guys can hear me. Okay. Yeah. So hello, my name is Orson, and I'm currently a university student, and I've been working on trying to like get internships, and so far I've have secured two under my belt. Just one based in Ottawa and one based in California, but they're all for C++ type development jobs, which I know a lot of people don't like C++ nor C, but I feel like I'm an all about because I like C++ and C, especially when it comes to embedded systems and robotics. And one issue I tend to see a lot is that there's a lot of like full stack developers and jobs, and like there's like a multitude of them. But when it comes to things like embedded systems or robotics or hardware, which is where I'm more towards leaning, not saying full stack is bad, but I'm just saying that's more my taste. I don't see that many um, jobs available, and I'm wondering like, should you like quote unquote jump ship and like start learning full stack, or if I should like stick with it because like like robotics and embedded systems is something that like I thoroughly enjoy. But if you just, I mean, the jobs are there. Like there are companies that just focus on it, like um, that focus on robotics and etc. But I was wondering if you guys would have any input, or if it's better to be like a jack of all trades, master of none, or to be like kind of just like specific in one area. Because so far the internships I've worked in the past were based on C++ security, embedded systems, and type things, but like no like Python or anything of those sorts. And also, lastly, if you're comfortable, do you mind if you could drop your LinkedIn? Because I'm always trying to connect and diversify my network. So
I think maybe I could field this question. Since personally my interests are not in full stack development, I'm very much a systems programming guy. And at my current job, for example, we do Erlang, C, Rust. I might be able to convince some people to get some Zig in there. So though we have kind of not similar interests because I don't do like quite embedded stuff, but kind of, we're similar in that we're interested in things that are a bit more niche. And personally, I feel it's worked very well for me. Even though yes, there are less jobs in systems engineering or embedded programming than in say full stack web development, but at the same time there are still plenty of jobs, and for me those jobs are just more fulfilling. And I think that's an important like discussion to have. We're very fortunate in this industry that we can have a lot of control over what we do and where we work and on what we work, and to the point that going always for what's most in demand isn't necessarily the best strategy for you. Because if you absolutely hate working on front end JavaScript, then going into like full stack web development might not be a very interesting option when you can have just as fulfilling a career, if not more, doing the things that you're actually more interested in. And I don't believe you'll be setting yourself back in any way in career growth and compensation by sticking to the niche that you want to specialize in.
Yes, I completely agree with that. So I actually had this dilemma before. I had this exact same question as you. I kind of came to my own conclusion through experience. Or I was trying to be full stack and like kind of trying to know everything. I was doing a bit of everything, jack of all trades sort of thing. But I realized I do a lot better when I just stick to the thing I really like and I'm really good at, which tends to be more towards the front end, sometimes the API level, but not like touching databases and like going any lower than that. And there is literally no difference in terms of career opportunities, no difference in terms of pay or anything like that. I work on mostly front end now, and I just am much happier when I concentrate on doing what I enjoy doing. And literally, I think every part of I'm forgetting the word right now. Every niche in the industry is really in demand right now. So I don't think specializing, if you want to do that, will hold you back at all. If you want to be a jack of all trades, like go for it. But there's also absolutely nothing wrong with specializing, whether that's low level or all the way up to front end.
Thank you very much for that. Lastly, do you think I don't know if you're comfortable sharing, but do you think it's possible to drop LinkedIn's? Because I don't know, LinkedIn was the way I secured my 2 internships so far, so I'm like just trying to get as many LinkedIn's as I can. But if you're not comfortable with that, that's completely cool.
You can actually go to the CS Career Hub, and if anybody is publicly listed there, I'm assuming Brenda, Gopher, if you're comfortable with having people link to you there, or at least message you to have a conversation, that's probably the best way to start that. But that's probably the safest bet at this point.
Okay, thank you, and yeah, thank you for the feedback and result. Super. I know I don't want to be a hog, but just like one last question, I promise. So sorry, but do you think it's possible that like coming from a background of like working on like network security and like sockets and ports and network programming, do you think it's possible to work on like API development backend? Because I see that's like another popular thing that might be kind of close to like lower level, but also in the mix of like webby dev kind of things. And I was just wondering, in your experience, have you seen a lot of people with like a background in like network programming, security, and C work like API development backend jobs or networking, etc.? Sorry, that's my last question.
So yeah, so this question is particularly specific, and what I recommend you consider is that people who are working in a particular specialization can transition to different areas relatively easily, so long as their fundamentals are there. And so, Gopher and Brenda, of course, they have their particular experience, but what I would actually suggest is go into different aspects of like career questions or security in the actual Discord server, and you'll see that you'll see that people have made those transitions relatively not so much easily, but relatively well. And it's something that you yourself should have that option, so long as you're working on those fundamentals throughout your career and not just pigeonholing yourself and focusing on just doing one thing over and over and over again. So that's my suggestion for you. Thank you for your questions so far. They're rather in depth, and we're gonna go ahead and hop on over to some of our text questions now. We actually have one from one of our server members, UNE. This one is, what can you do in your first 1 to 3 years to have a better chance of having a good resume for top tier tech companies at your work and outside of it? Any advice on how to improve your callback rate from big N type companies early in your career? This is actually relatively interesting since our two folks are relatively early in their careers. So their insight is really one of, doing those things now in the hopes that those things will pay off if they so choose to make that jump. But let's go ahead and start with Brenda. Brenda, what are your thoughts on this question?
So I am exactly at 2-ish years of experience. So I work at Adobe, and I've been here for about 2 years now. I was casually actually looking around for different opportunities, not really serious about it, but just seeing what's out there and like maybe for practicing interviews or whatever. And I noticed that if I just switch my LinkedIn to looking for opportunities, I get emails like crazy. Like I don't even have to apply. Other recruiters will just contact me. I feel like if you have been working at a place for 2 years, that's kind of a sweet spot. So I've been told by some more senior friends that 2 to 3 years is a really good sweet spot for changing jobs, because you're either at or almost at a mid-level kind of role at that point. And you're still cheaper than a senior, but you're not as risky as like a new grad. People love hiring people who have 1, 2, or 3 years of experience. So that's kind of a perfect time to change jobs if you want to. I think you'll find a lot of opportunities. So it's really kind of just putting yourself out there. For improving callback rate, I think you kind of have to A/B test with your resume a bit. For me, I get pretty pretty high callback rates. I don't know if that is a factor of maybe my school or current job, but I think I also have a really nice InDesign resume that is just like very appealing to the eye, with a lot of good, like solid projects that people use on there. I think that's a big part of it. Like before I even worked at Adobe and like I didn't have a CS degree, I had a really high callback rate, and I think that was because I crafted my resume really well. I had a ton of projects on there. I put on anything that would that I had a lot of internships and like freelance jobs and part-time things, and they were all no-name things. But like if you did, I'm kind of getting off track here, but basically, I think a lot of it is about resume design and selling yourself well on your resume. Um, Having good projects, like really solid ones, not just your typical like you made a MVC app or something that no one uses or that you don't even use. So all in all, just like good, well visually designed resume, um, and good projects, and really meaningful, quantifiable bullet points of either like users or like you improved the effectiveness of something by like 50%, things with the numbers and that are meaningful. Um, uh, Other than that, I feel like just having that 1 to 3 years of experience is really gonna put you at the top of the list for a lot of recruiters. Like, just switch your LinkedIn on to like looking for opportunities, and your inbox is probably gonna blow up.
Great. Yeah, great input. Yeah, that's sometimes it's just having the time in is enough, right, to get the interest.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Gopher, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree about sometimes just needing to have the time. In my case, I like I have technically only like 6 or 7 months of like post graduation experience, but because I have like so many internships on my LinkedIn, it can often look to a recruiter as if I have around 2 years of experience, which is, if I add up all my internships is around what I have. And I've also noticed like just a really large uptick in recruiter attention. I generally get a few recruiter messages like every week, even though I'm not looking. And like when I tried setting up to like looking for work, I got multiple messages per day. So I think just having like having a few jobs on your resume just or your LinkedIn just makes a huge difference. And besides beyond that, for like improving callback rate, I think really there's two ways you can go about it. The first is what Brenda said, like improving your resume, both like visually and the content, so you can improve the signal to noise ratio, which can be a little difficult because what's signal and what's noise can vary depending on who's reading your resume. But like I think if you just kind of try and improve, like put more quality content, better projects, and they don't like the projects, like in my case, there were just things that I did because I wanted to learn about it. Like I did a Game Boy emulator that no one's ever going to use in any serious capacity, but I had fun doing it and I learned a ton. So I have a few projects like that were purely educational, and they use a variety of technologies as well. So because I just wanted to learn different technologies, but also to show that I could use multiple different technologies and I was polyvalent. And so that's like one way you can increase callback rate with just your resume. But I think another one is just by leveraging your network. And granted, that's difficult when you're an intern, because as a student, your immediate peers are not in a position that they can really kind of refer you or anything, because you're all kind of in the same boat of trying to get that first job. But definitely, if you can get some kind of like industry contacts outside of that, and certainly once you have actually started your career, you'll find that just having people refer you can just increase your callback rate like just tremendously. And yeah, so just having referrals by having a wider professional network can, like, even if your resume is not that great, that can help a lot. And it can be difficult, especially in the pandemic times, to kind of develop that network in early in your career. But one tip that maybe might help you is to be very active on the server. Personally, I've had multiple offers for referrals at multiple companies just by being a very active member of the server. So that, and it's not only like CSCH. There's once they reopen, things like meetups and potentially hackathons that can happen in your city that could be a very good avenue.
A lot of great stuff, Gopher. I mean, there's a lot of different creative ways to have impact, right? Different creative ways beyond just having the job. That doesn't necessarily mean grinding lead code every night and mass applying. There's different avenues to try to build yourself up and your career. So thanks, Gopher. Thanks, Brenda. Next up, let's get one of our audience members. We have one of our pretty active members lined up to speak right now. Flower's son, we're going to pull you in. Interested to see what question you have for us this evening. You're muted, but welcome to the chat.
Hi. Yeah, I kind of have a question that maybe a lot of people here have, and I'm not sure if someone asked this already. So if you're a student slash new grad, what do you think the best tools are for preparing for at the interview at a really large company, like a really good company? Like, would you say it's so there are a bunch of books. Would you say it's one of these books, forgot the name of it, or would you say it's like Lead Code? And also for system design, what would you say the best tools for preparing for that are? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, let's see. Gopher, Brenda, did you understand the question?
Yep, I understood the question. Just kind of, well, I can try and answer it. Now, in my case, in like being a student in Quebec and Montreal, the like typical lead code interview wasn't actually very common. So I never did a ton of prep in university because it wasn't a very good use of my time. But one thing that I noticed is that I still did a little bit of like leak code and whatnot just to kind of practice for like maybe applying in the United States or in English Canada. But what I've noticed is like even without like actually like practicing and doing interview prep, I naturally improved at algorithm problems just as a function of my amount of experience. So by working on projects, by doing my internships, I would like go months in between lead code sessions, and then when I would go back, I would suddenly be able to do problems that I just could not when I first saw them, they made no sense to me. I didn't know at all how to approach them, and suddenly they did. Like I had an inkling of how to solve them. So I don't know if I can like really give good recommendations for most people that may actually need to do a lot of interview prep in whatever, like I think in the United States this is, and potentially English Canada this is the case. But I feel like just coding a lot will make you naturally a better lead coder and thus a better interviewee.
Yep, I totally agree with that. Back in college, I was just grinding like code mostly, because my projects weren't really like I didn't have to do some really intense like data structures and algorithms or recursion or anything. Um, but after college, after I'd been working for a while, I had to actually use BST in some of our code, a binary search tree. I had to use depth first search sometimes. I had to do something similar to like an LRU cache implementation. And those are all like very typical topics that you'll see in LeetCode. And I work on the front end. So that was kind of interesting to like have those typical code questions in there. So I definitely agree that just like coding and getting more experience actually helps with the whole interview prep grind a lot. Um, but I also don't have much to recommend other than that because I kind of hate like studying specifically for interviews, and I generally try to avoid it.
Great input. And I hope that answered your question, Flower Sun. And always, you know, the chat is here. We have event chat here in the Discord for you to ask follow-up questions. And if you'll notice, we actually have some pretty great input coming in from other people who aren't even participating in the AMA itself. They're just listening in and providing their feedback. So don't be afraid to ask follow-up questions. That's the beauty of having this, you know, virtually and live. And we really appreciate everybody who's contributing. Next up, we're going to jump back over to our text channel. And here we actually have, I'm gonna take a quick look here at a question from Takashi. We actually have sort of a couple questions from Takashi that are relatively similar, and I think I'm gonna take the one that's somewhat, I guess, most relevant probably to the vast majority of our audience, the rising senior question. But there's also some good questions to be asked about foreigners who are trying to come in, or foreign developers trying to come in and work here in the United States. But let's start with the rising senior one. So we have, as a rising senior, trying to secure my first internship to better my employment chances post-graduation. I'm wondering what sort of pointers you have to network and get opportunities during the pandemic, and if there are any qualities that you've found companies are looking for in potential interns. So let's go ahead and open it up. Gopher or Brenda, whichever one of you wants to take it first, go for it.
Yeah, so funny thing is I actually did a lot of networking during the pandemic virtually. Maybe part of it is because I do a bunch of community management in here as well as other places. Um, but I feel like if you can find communities that have a lot of like-minded individuals and you reach out to them for like one-on-ones, Zoom meetings, like maybe a virtual lunch or something like that. There's plenty of people willing to do that. I think even if you're not in those communities, you can probably reach out on LinkedIn to people who seem to have interesting careers or work at places that are interesting to you, and just ask them. Like you're not gonna get a yes, maybe like half the time, but then the other half will respond, and I think that's pretty worth it to try. Some people have messaged me on LinkedIn and I reply to them and we have one-on-ones and it turns out to be a pretty cool connection. I think as long as you put yourself out there, look for the opportunities, maybe find the right virtual community that suits like what you're looking for, and meet people that way. Just kind of reach out and be like, hey, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but like if you have 15 minutes, I want to discuss, maybe this and this career thing or this and this role or other cool thing that you're doing with you. Just reach out that way through virtual communities and spaces with people who seem to have similar interests.
Great input. Gopher, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, to kind of go back to something I said before. I think personally the biggest thing that like improved the size and quality of my professional network was being active on CSCH. Like Brenda said, like finding that a virtual community that where you have a lot of people that you kind of mesh well with can be a very useful tool for networking. And as for the second part of the question, like what like companies are looking for in potential interns, I think there's two main ways to answer this. The first one is like what do like companies themselves look for, and companies, they look for future employees. For the most part, that's the purpose of the internship program. It's a long interview process to hire junior engineers. But there's also like the perspective of the actual like people hiring you are not just like a faceless company. They're your manager, they're your peers. The people are actually involved in the interview process, at least at the companies that I've been at, are actually members of your own team. And so in speaking with those people at every internship that I've had, one thing that came back pretty often is that they were looking for people that went a bit off the beaten path of school. They didn't just do their schoolwork and kind of that's it. They went and they learned things on their own. They experimented with technologies, experimented with projects, and those are all kind of the things that my team members would look for in interns.
Yeah, thanks for also tapping that second part of that question. And it's something that actually is tied into a variety of different aspects of the job hunt, right? It's not just when you're in school trying to find that one internship, or trying to get that next job as a new grad, or your mid-level job. Those things can affect you all along the way, right? It's definitely a continuum. So yeah, great input all around. We actually have quite a few people here raising their hands, trying to get their voices heard. You love to see the people, trying to participate. Let's get Ace in here, who looks like they're a new member of the community. Have them come in and speak for a second. Ace, welcome to the chat. You're muted. Let's hear you.
Hi, I'm Robert. I might be on the maybe random side of your community. I just joined. I'm a student from Romania. I'm at the CS faculty, but it's mixed with economy, and I have a question about this. I have a personal belief that programming appeared from our need of improving our efficiency, so it needs a domain somewhere to act in. So, how important is it to research a certain domain in which the programming skills help? Like, if I want to, program at a company that's in economic audit or accounting or whatever, how much should you research that field, or should you just tunnel vision on programming alone?
Excellent question, and thank you for calling in from all the way on the other side of the world. We really appreciate you participating today. So essentially, the question is how deeply do you need to dig into the domain of whatever the application of your development is going to be, if I'm understanding you correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, and how much does it count as well?
Absolutely. Great question. Gopher, Brenda, let's hear from you.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
Go ahead.
Oh.
Okay.
So polite.
You go ahead. You go first.
Okay. So I think you're correct in your assessment that tech and computer science in particular, on their own, are kind of useless. Computer science, it's a bit of a misnomer, but like in French, it's called informatics, and it's essentially like the science of information. of like how to automatically, do things with the information, how to process it. The thing is, that's useless without information to process, and it's useless without things to do with the information. So you're correct that like pure tech in term of CS is not very useful on its own. So especially in the, I think there's a lot of merit in, say, doing a dual major in CS and something else, and see how you can apply computer science to that other domain. However, in tech, there's a lot of opportunity to work on pure tech, whose problem domain is just other tech. And that's kind of what like systems engineering is. Like the things I work on day to day, the users of the programs I make are other programs, and I'm a few steps removed from any actual work being done in a way. So you can definitely like focus on pure tech, at least at first, and maybe eventually you'll work so long in like in fintech, for example, that you'll start to learn more of the jargon and the underlying business rules. But I don't think it's a requirement, especially not to start with.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I only really started getting more deep knowledge in the niche that I am once I started working. Before that, like I said, I didn't do a CS degree and I only took like 2 CS classes. I really still don't have that much CS theory knowledge. I'm really not that deep into computer science things. I do a lot of front end, so my knowledge in front end is pretty deep, but that was really just built over the past 2 years of experience. To begin with, it really wasn't. I not delve in too deeply. You just kind of have to know enough to get the first job, and have good communication skills, be able to ask a lot of questions, and figure out things as you go along. I think that's what really counts. Uh, unless you're getting into like ML or AI or something like really, really deeply technical, like that, where you have to know like a bunch of math and things like that. I mean, even then, I think there are a lot of I have some friends in that, and they don't know it that deeply. Like, it's really just built over time through experience. So I would say, like in terms of theory, in terms of like going really deep into the domain you're getting into, at least to begin with, you really don't need to go too deep, and it comes with time and experience.
Yeah, and I also want to add a little brief follow-up, almost as a not so much a counter, but sort of to make sure that we have sort of a good range of perspective. Certain areas of development will and will not require that deep dive, like Gopher and Brenda mentioned. But for what I've found, at least in certain industries, because sometimes this can be industry specific, there's going to be a period of time where you're going to, depending on who you're working under, like what your team structure looks like, the organization, the nature of the work, there may be periods of time where it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to start writing any code if you don't really understand at least some fundamentals of whatever field. So you might see this in areas where the application is like manufacturing, and you need to understand the specifics of that manufacturing process before you start tweaking any code, because you might be testing right there in production. So just a little detail there. Again, something to consider. Real quick, I want to thank Brenda for participating. Brenda's going to hop off a little bit early for us. We appreciate her participation today, and of course, all that she gives to CSCH. Thank you, Brenda. If you want to just say a quick goodbye before you hop off, we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, this was super fun. I wish I could keep staying here longer, but I have some unplanned things that came up.
Such is
But
life.
I'll be around. I'll be around. Thanks for listening.
Absolutely. And again, everybody, this will be recorded. So if you're interested in hearing back, if you missed any of the insight from Brenda today, rest assured we'll get a recording up for you so that you can play it at your leisure. We're looking at places like our website as well as YouTube for you to listen for free, like all the other work that we do here at CS Career Hub. In her place, we have our resident black cat, Nick, hailing from Rubrik, who has been very busy recently, doing so much work trying to get onboarded. But they've been, Nick's been here for quite some time, actually been working as a mod and as an admin and now our bot development lead, working on making sure that the community runs nice and smoothly. So Nick, welcome to the chat, and we appreciate you being here.
Yep. Hey, good to be here.
Yeah, no, it's kind of a little surprise dropping you in, but
Yeah.
we appreciate you, stepping in on behalf of Brenda and giving us a little bit of your insight. So after that last question, we're going to go ahead and jump back over to the text. I know that there's a couple questions here that might interest folks. I'm actually going to take a look at one of our newer questions, and let's take a look at one from Harsh, one of our student members. And their question is simply, what are your views on Udemy courses to learn different technologies? And I'm going to expand that from not just Udemy, but really any of those online courses where you can learn a specific technology or language. Let's go ahead and start with Nick. I want to let's poke Nick first. I want to see what Nick has to say about this.
Yeah, no, these there are a few of them. So like, let's just kind of single out the main few. So you have Udemy, you have Coursera, O'Reilly, and LinkedIn Learning. And with every one of them, there are pros and cons. Udemy and Coursera both are pretty structured. Coursera is more expensive, but also is more curated. With Udemy, it's really anyone can post up anything they want, so you're going to get a lot more false positives on what's good, what isn't. And O'Reilly is more books. They have some videos on there, they have some courses, but mostly it's just the books. So you get to reviews, you get some previews, which is also interesting. So it's really how best you want to learn. Like all these various courses, I know there's like OSSU that structure different Coursera and Udemy stuff together to make a comprehensive computer science course for you. And I think for the most part, it does a very good job and you can definitely learn a lot, but I wouldn't just throw Udemy as like a replacement for any one course you're doing in university, if you are in university. So that's kind of what I would view it as. And again, like you kind of have to pick and mix a bit, because I know with the Udemy and Coursera, different things, different courses which are good for both. Yeah.
Gopher, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I used Udemy for a time. I found it useful to learn. Yeah, to me, it has a very narrow kind of point in time where it's actually Udemy can be useful. And speaking about Udemy specifically, I think Coursera can be generally a bit better in that aspect. But Udemy is usually just beginner tutorials, which can be useful if you're still very early and you need to learn, say, JavaScript, and at school all you learn in C++ or Java. I think there can be some work there because it gives you a structured approach. But what I found is that it's very fast that you no longer find anything on Udemy useful. And personally, like after a couple languages I learned, going on Udemy to learn a new technology just meant going through the slog of beginner content of like what's a variable, what's a function, because the guides are more how to learn programming with, say, JavaScript more than they are how to learn JavaScript if you already know how to program. So that kind of sums up my opinion. I think there's a very brief period of time when you're starting out that it can be useful, and after that you're better off learning languages and technologies in other ways because it'll just be faster.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important that we consider that there's a lot of different options available. It's not just, it's like, you know, Nick listed out several options. Gopher obviously focused on things like Udemy, but it's also important to note the distinction between learning a specific language, like learn C# to make X, right? Versus learn databases or learn some fundamental principle of computer science. And that oftentimes will be taught by somebody who actually has some real good time in the field and knows what they're talking about. But I actually think, you know, Kevin, who's been rather quiet this whole time, has some input of their own. I'd like to see what you had to say about this, Kevin. What do you think about this?
Yeah, so I've taken a few of these courses. I learned basically the entire calc series in a few days through Coursera, I think. I do want to say these courses will not specifically help you with finding a job. A recruiter or a hiring manager will not look at your resume and say, "Hey, they took this and this course; they're good." But it will help you get out of it what you put into it. There are some great courses you can take, and it'll teach you some really cool things that you can apply to your projects. So it's more on the line of use it as a resource to learn what you need versus use it as a course that a job will look at.
Yeah, excellent point. It sounds like for the most part we're relatively all in agreement. We're just coming at the perspective from different angles. Just be aware. It's really, you know, not so much buyer beware, but just be sure that you know what you're getting yourself into and what the scope is of the knowledge base of the person teaching you and of the course itself. Just something to consider. So that last one was a text question. Let's jump back over to our voice chat, our brave souls who want to hop on and let us hear their thoughts directly. We have Mohi CS, member in the server. Let's bring them in now. Mohi CS, welcome to the chat. What are your thoughts today?
Hey, yeah, thanks for bringing me on. I wanted to specifically ask about the end of the entire job search. So you've had the interview, you've got great feedback. They even extend you an offer. They give you the numbers. And maybe you're happy with the numbers, maybe you're not. And now you're considering negotiation. So I'm wondering, did you guys go through any sort of negotiation process or just, you know, accept the offer after some period of time thinking about it? And if you did negotiate, what was your strategy? And what would you say the percentage increase was from your strategy?
Great question. Gopher, Nick, hey, even Kevin, have at it. What are your thoughts?
Well, I could go first. I went through essentially my first round of negotiations in November for my first job. First like post-grad job. And the way I approached it was that I had a number in mind based on the compensation I was getting from my internships. And so I just kind of had that number, and when companies would make an offer or like ask my expectations, I would be very open that was the number I was looking for. And if they couldn't offer it, I was more than willing to walk away. And that led in like both in two cases, it led to them trying to like kind of match through like a sign-on bonus or the like. But ultimately, I walked away from both of those offers because they couldn't match what I wanted, and I thought I could actually get it elsewhere. And when Samsung Ads finally did offer me, I didn't have to like fight very hard. I just asked the number I had in mind, and they offered more than that. So I didn't go through like a so it's, it I think I would recommend trying to, if at all possible, negotiate with other offers in hand. Because or not even in hand, but like if you've had other offers in the past for a certain number, it's very easy to justify standing your ground on salary negotiation. I know that was the most difficult part of salary negotiation for me as a new grad was that I didn't have offers, so all I had to base my desired salary on was kind of my gut feeling of what was fair. And a gut feeling is not something that's very strong when you're being pressured by an offer. So I think now that I have more experience and that I'll probably be able to get to line up multiple offers at the same time, I think that's the kind of the best strategy, really. Because if you have multiple offers, you can just tell the other company that you have an offer for this much and can they match. And there's no guesswork involved. You have this offer, and if you're willing to walk, it gives you a ton of leverage.
Yeah, that confidence to walk away because real numbers are in play definitely has an impact. Great point. Nick, what do you think? Uh-oh, did we lose you? Or am I just not hearing you?
No, I'm not hearing him either.
Black Cat fell asleep. Tisk tisk. Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I actually agree quite a bit. When it comes to being able to walk away, that's your biggest factor in terms of negotiating. But a couple of additions. You don't always have to walk away, or you don't always have to negotiate. If they give you a number you're very, very, very satisfied with, and it matches to what you expect from that level and that location, you could just say, "Yeah, I think this is great." And also, one thing I would push is when you negotiate it, support it with data. Support it with, hey, here's the cost of living. Here's where I'm at. You're promoting me from SD2 to SD3. Therefore, I expect this kind of raise based on this location. All things that you could support with actual data will be hard to say no to. So, so support it. And then, kind of all the other points that were brought up with Gopher as well.
Yeah, really hard to back down from numbers, right? That are like that actual data, especially if you're experienced looking at the data and knowing especially if you're looking at companies that have really well-defined bands that are visible, to people from the outside. That's really powerful. Let's see. Nick, have you resurrected? Are you back with us?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. What do you think?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so what I was saying was I'm like the exact poster boy for what you see articles, messages in like Reddit or here, and books tell you what not to do. Because typically with recruiters, you're told to not give a number, told not to like, it's like basically poker. You try and see who folds first. And I guess to do the opposite. I just tell them the number I want, like what I expect, and kind of like what are my expectations, and see if they meet them. If they do, then great. If they don't, I usually give the number like that I expect, but maybe on the higher end of what I expect, and just see if they can meet my kind of secret number. And then it kind of just plays on from there. Like both times, so like this is my second job now. Both times, both companies never really hesitated to meet my numbers. So like I've never had this problem. But yeah, I think like the key point with what Gopher said is that if like whatever number you give, whatever you end up negotiating with, you gotta remember that you gotta be willing to walk away if it doesn't go your way. And if you're not willing to walk away, then you probably should think about twice whether you want to negotiate or not.
Absolutely. That seems to be the resounding conclusion that everyone's come to so far is be confident in your numbers and don't just take what they give you, right? You got to be prepared to tell them thanks, but no thanks. So great question. And I just want to do a quick reminder. We're here technically in the last 15 minutes or so of our scheduled AMA. If you were here for the last one, you'll know that we have a habit of kind of running longer. We're not exactly very good at shutting off right at the buzzer, but depending on how our participants feel today, we'll go ahead and wind it down with the last few questions from the text channel, as well as the audience. But I'm going to go ahead and jump back over to a question that was asked a little earlier this week from Ariel, one of our senior devs here. Thank you for participating. Ariel asks, how do you spot a scam internship or job versus a legitimate one? And I think this one actually you can expand if there's any tangential detail here about finding work that's legitimate, worth pursuing, barring just the scams, but the work that, how do you judge a job from the outside to the best of your ability when you're trying to evaluate it? So let's open it up to the floor. Anyone who wants to take it, all yours.
I think evaluating a job evaluating a job can be pretty difficult from the outside in. But I think the bigger the company size, the easier it is to find data. And I think the best example of that is any of the big N companies. Like, there's so many people that work and have worked at, say, Google or Facebook, that getting information on kind of the organization as a whole is very easy. Even if getting information on a specific team might not be. So that can help a lot. But so I think the biggest risk is at smaller companies and specifically startups, where there's not enough people that have worked there that you can ask like their opinion on the place. There's not a large enough history to kind of base your decision on. Maybe the company didn't exist a year ago and won't exist in a year, just due to the nature of startups. I think that's where you might have the most trouble. And for that, I don't have like a really good like solution to how to judge a job. Personally, I go a lot by gut feeling. I speak with the interviewer. I ask the questions that I think might give me a hint as to what's behind the curtain. But like ultimately, it's all guesswork and just kind of trusting my gut feeling, which can be wrong and has been wrong before. So I think it's a matter of just kind of interviewing a lot until you kind of develop this kind of almost sixth sense for whether someone is bullshitting you or not.
Yeah, it can be tough to judge when somebody is being straight with you about a role and the nature of the work itself. So that's where knowing some good exploratory questions oftentimes will help reveal those answers during the interview, right?
Yeah, and I'd like to add that, like, as an interviewer, I have been in a position where I wanted to say some things to the applicant just so they knew what they were getting into, but it was kind of awkward to say them like just outright, especially if you have a multi-interviewer setup. But so all I could do was kind of kept wishing that they would ask certain questions. So I think in most cases the interviewer is not your enemy there. Like if there's if someone works in a company that they don't think is so good, like they'll take any opportunity you give them to communicate that fact, but they might not be able to be super open about it. So I think it's a matter of finding the right questions that give opportunities for the interviewer to kind of be a bit more candid. But what those questions are, I don't know exactly.
Sure, absolutely. And that's something that gets talked about quite a bit in the server. There's pins in certain channels like career questions, ask engineering leadership, I believe, maybe inexperienced, where you can look and see some good input, maybe even in tech chat or big end discussion. But we definitely have resources for people on that front. Nick, what do you think about this particular question?
I'll revert back to the first, like the original question, like what scam is and isn't, and I'll just kind of flip it a bit and just say that sometimes unfortunately, sometimes very, very legitimate recruiters and companies will seem very fishy. Like I've had recruiters who messaged me who have had spelling errors, who have like grammatical issues, had it sound very off, and then it turns out they're a recruiter for Citadel. So like, and also if you ever get emails from Amazon recruiters, you realize they're some of the okay, this is my personal opinion, but they're some of the worst formatted emails I've ever seen. They have word arts, they have like random bold red colors, everything, to the point that one of my recruiter emails ended up getting caught in my spam filter, like just because even Gmail thought it was like way too off, but then it turned out the person was like legitimate. So like I know it's like the last thing people want to hear, where it's like sometimes even the sketchy things aren't sketchy, but especially with finding a job, you have to take sometimes a bit more seriously and do your own research at times. You have to research the person, research the company, the position, and not always take everything at face value.
Just want to point out that Citadel jab made me laugh. But yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I have a small addition in terms of the scam jobs for internships and stuff. If a job is promising you, first of all, if the job says unpaid internship or unpaid position, or if they're promising to pay you an experience or how this will be the experience you need to get your step in the door, it's a scam. Don't do it. As far as other internships, I think the other ones probably talk great on it. So,
yeah, great input. In general, I think those answers in general have covered a really good range as to what to look out for. Generally, I think the most important detail, it's going to sound rather, trivial, but you can go through the whole process, get to the end, and everything sounds legit. And then you start doing the paperwork and things just don't seem to line up. So sometimes it's just being able to recognize when you're looking at the details of the deal, contract, payment method, all the things that are standard for a job. If you're newer to this, it might be harder to recognize, but once you have done, worked one or two jobs, it becomes easier to spot when things are a little sketchy on the back end. But a lot of that instinct comes with experience, so you'll even be able to see some of that on the front end as well. But hey, it's like Nick said, sometimes you talk to a very legitimate company and that recruiter just makes it seem a little off. So really, you never know. You just got to give it a chance and go through the process, and hopefully you strike gold. Well, the time is now 8:24. We're gonna, at least where I am, Central Time. We're gonna wrap up with this last question. We have a new member, or not a new member. We have a member here in the voice channel who's been waiting very patiently. We appreciate you sticking it out. Here we have Aria Man Jamwal. I'm gonna bring you in right now. and hopefully you have a question for us. I'll give us a little bit to chew on and ponder. Welcome to the chat. You're now live.
Hi, before asking my question, I pre-apologize. It's quite basic. Yeah, it's just that I'm 17 and I just did my 12th grade, and I'm thinking of pursuing my future head of development. I have practiced Java for 2 to 3 years in my high school, and I've just started learning Python some days ago. So I just wanted to know what are all the useful programming languages I should prioritize learning, or which skills I should equip myself before starting my college. Give or would be helpful for me in the future as I got some spare money. All the
Sure, yeah.
programming languages that I should prioritize, or all the skills that I should.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're about to start your college career, and I'm gonna read. I'm gonna speak back. The question as far as I can understand it. The volume was a little low, so I'm gonna try to answer it back to you. So essentially, you're getting ready to look at university. You're looking at what to study, and the question is what languages you think are a good starting point for you at this point, since you're just getting started. So that sounds like a good question for really anybody here, since there's quite a range of different programming experience here in the call right now. But let's start with our programming language enthusiast, Gopher. What do you say to this?
Yeah, so I think it's no secret to any regular on the server to have some very strong feelings about programming languages. But I think for someone just starting out, I think it's definitely a good thing to learn multiple languages. And not just multiple languages, but languages that are actually fairly different from one another. So let's say if you're learning Java, mostly Java right now, maybe explore Python or JavaScript, which are, scripting interpreted languages, and will have different idioms and kind of way to do things than in Java. Or maybe go deeper into C++ and explore kind of systems programming and things like compile time computation and the like. Or Rust if you want to explore that same niche when the language is a bit more modern and has some aspects of functional programming, or straight up a functional language like maybe Haskell or Lisp or Erlang or whatever. Because I feel like if you have a good exposure to different kinds of programming languages, it makes it very easy to learn new languages, because you can use your knowledge of past languages and past way of doing things and past knowledge of certain features to guide your learning for the next the N+1 language you're learning. And also, just because if you learn a pattern in one language, it can often be useful in others that don't even use the same paradigm. And I think one excellent example is learning functional programming. You can use a lot of ideas from functional programming in, say, Java or C# or any of the traditional object-oriented languages, where you might start favoring immutability to have things be a bit easier to reason about, or you might prefer a more declarative approach to code, or you might start using things like map and filter and reduce over straight loops. Any number of tricks that can kind of help make your code easier to understand, or even more performant in some cases. So those are all like good reasons to like kind of diversify your programming language toolbox as much as you can. And even if that can be a bit difficult at first when you're still learning your first or second language, but I think it's a good thing to kind of power through that.
Yeah, good point. Sometimes you just have to get started. And that range you were speaking to is really important, especially if you're trying to be a generalist, right? But also just so that you have that perspective since each language has so many different trade-offs like you were mentioning. Nick, Kevin, any input? What do you suggest?
Yeah. Like Gopher said, I definitely agree. It's like the principles and paradigms are way more important than the language themselves. Like, for example, in college, like I learned OOP with Python, Java, and then we had to learn functional languages. So we learned OCaml, and we had to do systems programming, which I didn't do, but it's part of the curriculum anyway. Like at work, my first job was C#, so none of the language that I did. And my second job now is Scala and Go. Again, two languages that I never did in college. But like looking backwards, like C# is very similar to Java. The ideas are the same. Like they're both statically typed. They're both OOP languages. And then Scala, well, Scala can also be OOP, but the way it's generally used through functional means. So it was very similar to OCaml. And those ideas kind of stick around. So like you kind of recognize the patterns, you recognize the ideas that you end up reusing. And that's why like language themselves you don't really care about. And this would like all my managers have said so far is that they don't care what language you know when you come in. Like, do you know how to program? Yes. Do you know how to like do you know the general ideas of like functional programming? Do you know like that why there isn't loops, why it isn't imperative? Yes. Okay, we're good to go. Like you're 99% there. You can learn programming on the job. That's not the issue. And that's kind of where you go on. Like there are exceptions, of course. Like if I know OOP, I'm not going to be magically great at very low level system stuff with like assembly, but that's kind of like, I guess, a bit of an edge case and kind of a generalist speaking.
Yeah, that's great I like your perspective, especially how it contrasts with Gopher, because, we know how much Gopher likes, systems level and shell and things of that nature. And then you, of course, are coming from a more functional perspective, but ultimately, both of you kind of gave a very similar answer, which is it depends on what you're investing into yourself, right? If you're looking for that broader range, then learning the principles will matter more than just learning how to write something in Python, and knowing Python gets you the job, right? So great input. Kevin, any last thoughts for this one?
Yeah, actually, both of them said some great things. Usually, the approach I tell people is pick two languages, one that you're going to be an expert in, and once you're an expert in it, learn the second language. So you would apply your expert language to the new one, and it basically teaches you how to do it in another language. So take a program you want to code up and say, hey, I already know this in C++. Let's try it in Haskell, or let's try it in Java. And then you basically write out as much as you can and then look up how to answer a specific thing in that new language. So that is usually my advice. That helps people pick up on new stuff as you go along.
Yeah, and that's actually generally what I do to learn a new language. Like, for example, when I started learning Rust, I re-implemented my Game Boy emulator, which was in Go, in Rust, just to kind of, get proper context. Because you only start really learning a language when you actually try it out in a non-trivial application. And that's actually like probably the best advice I can give to like learn a new language is take one of your old projects and try implementing it in a new language, because you already know the project, you already know the problem, so you can just focus on how do you express that with the new features available to you in this new language. But if you are going to do that, don't do a Game Boy emulator. It's absolutely terrible to re-implement.
Yeah, that's a steep hill to climb as a first project. It just not recommended.
Emulators are fun the first time. The second time is just a slog of like, okay, I need to like add these registers for this instruction, and I need to sub these registers with this instruction. in your big ass switch case. It's just not very fun the second time around.
Yeah, and actually, this brings up a good point, and actually a nice transition from here. We have resources on the server for free, of course, that are pinned, that are essentially collections of different ideas for people who are either getting started, or maybe they've already got their feet wet but they don't know where to jump next, whether it's something open source, whether it's build your own X or what have you, things that will allow you to get started with a particular language that you're interested in. Or let's say you know a language, but you just haven't used the language for a particular purpose. And it kind of gives you opportunities to go outside your shell. We like the things that we're comfortable with, right? But it's important to remember that the thing that you're scared of, the thing that you are essentially resistant to, many times that's the area where you're going to grow. And we recommend that, for people who have been here for a long time, we have many great members in the server who have joined us this evening. Folks who are just, joining us for the first time, we appreciate you being here. I encourage you, if you haven't taken advantage of many of those different resources, those pins across the different channels, if you have some time this weekend, of course it's Friday, you want to go out, have a party, what have you, safely, I assume. But the important thing is take the time to invest in yourself in small doses where you can. Take a look at the free things available to you here and see if you can try something new. Try something that allows you to grow in this area. Maybe it's a new language or a concept you haven't tried before. And I hope that the spirit of what Gopher, Nick, Kevin, and of course Brenda, who was so gracious with her time as well today, I hope that the spirit of learning and continuing to challenge yourself and network with people here in the community, I hope that those things give you what you need to take that next step, whatever you've been attempting, but kind of dragging your feet on. Hopefully this is a nice little nudge to get you started this evening. So with that, we're a little bit past time, not too bad, of course. It's 8:37 my time here, Central, calling live from Houston, Texas. But I want to thank our guests this evening, Gopher, Nick, Kevin, and Brenda. We have several events planned. We opened this up thanks to our partnership with Discord to make this event bigger and bigger each time we do it. And the only way we're going to really be able to do that is with you and your help, and making sure that we're doing things that are in accordance with what you're looking for from events like this, areas where we can improve, areas where we can give you what you need. And so we have a survey that will be available for you under our community events listing in Discord. Please fill it out if you have time, of course. It should be relatively short. And to those who are interested in participating more in the server, you're welcome, of course, just to hop in and chat in our many different channels. But if you want to do a little bit more, maybe you're interested in being a moderator, doing a little bit of a contribution to events like this, or development, if you want to, dig a little deeper into some aspects of your development skills, we have opportunities for you to participate as well. So be on the lookout for opportunities to submit your skill set and your application for us to review. So with that being said, I want to once again thank everybody for participating. It's been a lovely evening with you. I'm going to actually start sipping on my whiskey ginger now and kick off this weekend. I hope all of you enjoyed, and we'll see you at the next one in 2 weeks.